Mecca is located in Saudi Arabia and is where Muhammad was raised and spent more than 50 years of his life spreading the Islamic religion. Mecca is also the holiest place in all of the Islamic world. Inside of Mecca, there are no other religions other than Islam. The Kaaba is in the middle of the Great Mosque and was created by Abraham and his son Ishmael in the 7th century. Nearly 3 million Muslims surround the Kaaba every year as a part of their Hajj. Outside of the city, every Muslim faces Mecca 5 times a day as a part of Salat. Mecca is important because 2/5 of Islam's 5 pillars are directed towards the city, and it holds the Great Mosque, which is the holiest site in all of Islam.
Our story begins with the city of Mecca. It is said that when Adam and Eve were first expelled from paradise, the two were separated, with Eve having landed near the city of Mecca and Adam having landed somewhere in the Far East. After many years of searching for one another, Adam finally managed to make his way down through the Arabian Peninsula to Mecca, and it was at the top of Mount Arafat, just outside the city of Mecca, where the two were finally reunited. Mecca is also significant because it is considered the first place on earth that God Almighty was worshipped alone. And so, it was at that very spot that Abraham and his son Ishmael built the first house of worship for God. In honor of this, God Almighty had built in the heavens a similar structure for the angels. And it is said that every day, 70,000 angels come to that building to perform their prayers and then leave, intending never to return again.
Muhammad, the Prophet of God, was born in Mecca around the year 570. He grew up in Mecca most of his life, and was where he was given the Quran by Angel Gabriel. Muhammad went up in a cave on Mount Jabal al-Nur in Mecca and received the Quran from Gabriel there. After he received the message from Gabriel, he started to gain many disciples through his speech. Once Muhammad started to spread Islam around Mecca, he was kicked out for starting the religion. He later moved to Yemen. After he gained a following in Yemen, he went back to Mecca and forced them to accept Islam as a religion. Mecca agreed to having Islam as their main religion. From there on, Islam spread rapidly throughout the Middle East.
This video shows the events that led up to Islam becoming the main religion in Mecca.
So the people who believed in Muhammad's message, the Muslims, were given a hard time. Some were even tortured and killed. A few of them managed to escape to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. But most were stuck in Mecca. Muhammad also had to cope with the death of his wife, and then just a few weeks later, his uncle too. Feeling very down, he went to the Kaaba to pray to Allah one night. Then, the weirdest thing happened. Jibreel turns up, sits him on a winged horse called Al-Buraq and flies him all the way from Mecca to Jerusalem. He prays with all the prophets who have ever lived. Then, he's taken up to the heavens to chat with some of the prophets, and then into paradise itself, where Allah tells Muhammad to pray 5 times a day and to stay strong. He's returned to Jerusalem and then flies back to the Kaaba in Mecca. We call it the night journey, and Muslims still argue whether it was a real experience or a vision, but whatever, it gave Muhammad a much needed boost, and just as well, because there were more tough times ahead. So, there was this other city called Yathrib. The people there heard about Muhammad and his message and invited him and his followers to join them. A few at a time, the Muslims left Mecca and made the dangerous journey across the desert to Yathrib. It's known as a hijra, which means migration, like birds do. Muhammad and a few of his friends stayed in Mecca until everyone had got away and then made plans for their own escape. But the ruling families wanted to kill Muhammad while they still could, so 7 sons, one from each family, was sent in the middle of the night to stab the Prophet while he slept. But he was way ahead of them, and when they burst into the house, Muhammad was gone. Trackers were sent out to hunt him down. Muhammad and his best friend Abu Bakr took a roundabout route to try and shake off the pursuit, but the trackers were too good and slowly gained on them. So Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in a cave and prayed that no one found them. The trackers found the cave all right, but they didn't bother going in to search. There was no way Muhammad could be inside, they thought. There was a spider's web over the mouth of the cave and a nesting bird at the entrance. He must have given them the slip. So off they went, leaving Muhammad and Abu Bakr protected by a spider and a bird. Muhammad made it safely to Yathrib, which was renamed Medina al-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, but most people just call it Medina. But Muhammad's worries weren't over yet. There were 3 big battles between the Muslims and the Meccans. First, the Battle of Badr, when Muhammad and just 313 men faced 1,000 Meccan soldiers. Miraculously, the Muslims won. Then there was the Battle of Uhud, which didn't go so well. Some of Muhammad's men disobeyed his orders and ran off during the battle to raid the Meccans' camp, and so the Muslims were outmaneuvered. Then there was the Battle of the Trench. Medina was protected on 3 sides by mountains, so when the Meccan forces advanced in the city, the Muslims just dug a deep trench. The Meccans made camp, but the weather was terrible. Pouring rain put out their fires and howling winds blew down their tents. Eventually they gave up and went back to Mecca. It was all a bit embarrassing. They were losing the respect of the local tribes who were flocking to join the Muslims. So a peace treaty was signed at Hudaybiyah, but it wasn't long before the Meccans broke it. Muhammad decided that enough was enough. By now he had over 10,000 men, so he led them across the desert to Mecca. The ruling families realised they'd made a huge mistake, but it was too late. All they could do was surrender and hope that the Muslim army killed them quickly. But Muhammad said there should be no more fighting.
The second pillar of Islam, Salat, is the obligation to pray 5 times a day, every day. When the Muslims pray, they face towards the Kaaba in Mecca. The direction that the Muslims face towards is called Qibla, and is significant because it unites the Muslims as one with God. Since the Kaaba is the holiest site in Islam and is the house of God, Muslims feel one with God while they pray because they are facing Mecca. This makes all Muslims think about Mecca every day, 5 times a day, which makes Mecca the most thought about city in the Islamic world. The 5th pillar of Islam, the Hajj, is the pilgrimage to Mecca. Every Muslim is obligated to take a pilgrimage to Mecca to visit the Great Mosque. Inside the mosque is the Kaaba, where nearly 3 million Muslims circle around and repeat prayers. The Hajj is important to Mecca because it adds nearly $23 billion to the country's GDP. Muslims from around the world travel to Mecca to complete their Hajj, and if there is nowhere to stay, many will bring tents or sleep in the streets. If a Muslim dies on their pilgrimage, they will be sent to paradise, which is the end goal of Islam. This makes Mecca the holiest city in all of Islam because it holds the Kaaba, and Muslims who die there get sent to paradise.
Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba as the house of God. The Kaaba was established as a central point of Muslim pilgrimage in the 7th century. The Muslims are expected to face the Kaaba only when performing Salat. Salat is basically just prayer and is also one of the 5 pillars. It is a physical, mental, and spiritual act of worship that is observed 5 times every day, only at prescribed times. In this ritual, the worshipper starts standing, bows, prostrates themselves, and then concludes while sitting on the ground. From any point in the world, the direction facing the Kaaba is called the Qibla. The Kaaba has been repaired and reconstructed many times since Muhammad's day. The structure was severely damaged by fire during the first siege of Mecca in the war between the Umayyads and Abd Allah al-Zubayr.
In conclusion, Mecca is important to Islam because it is where Muhammad was born, holds the holiest site in Islam, and is the directions all Muslims face when they pray to feel one with God. Almost half of the structure of Islam is devoted towards Mecca, and it is the holiest site in the Islamic world. Muhammad was born and raised in Mecca, and later went to Mount Jabal in Mecca, where he received the Quran from Gabriel. If Mecca never existed, Islam would not be a religion because Muhammad would not have been born. Therefore, the Quran wouldn't have been written.